Hey everyone, welcome to part 2 of the Cutlass Black versus Spirit C1 comparison video. It's been a little bit in the making here because we've been waiting on the Q&A to come out from CIG for the Spirit. I didn't feel like I had enough to talk about with just the 10 meter difference, or just the size increase alone. I didn't think warranted another video. So for this video, we're going to discuss both the Q&A and the size increase. I think there's a little bit to share on both of those accounts. I haven't read the Q&A yet, so you will be reading it with me in real time. This is not a live video, but, you know, it's live for me. Anyway. Okay. Also, first of all, want to thank everybody for kind of the amount of support that I got for the first video. I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, a YouTuber or anything like that. I'm just a guy who really likes Star Citizen and I guess likes to talk about it. And so it was, it was really great to see not the view counts necessarily, but the comments. It was really cool to see all of the communication. And I read all of them. If you got a like, then I gave you, that means I read your comment. Doesn't necessarily mean that I agree or disagree with what you said. But if you got a like, it means that I read it. So, all right. So we're going to talk about the Q&A first, and then we're going to move on to the size, the size differential for the Spirit. So I mentioned last time that the Q&A, somebody did their own version of the Q&A where they went and they answered all the questions. And I think this is a great idea because there's some issues that CIG has some issues, in my opinion, when it comes to how they do these Q&As. First, they allow questions to be in the Q&A that are really simple. Like number one on Spyfire's thing, which is 48 SU for all of the variants. Because originally in the documentation, it was for all of the variants. I actually don't expect that this will be on the Q&A because they already adjusted the specifications to say no, that the other two variants don't have any cargo. But who knows, right? And that's the problem with the Q&A. Usually it's like the first 10 most upvoted questions in the Q&A get answered, and they can be silly. Like, does the Spirit have a bed anywhere? And it's like, yeah, of course it's going to have a bed. It's a Cutlass comparison, a Cutlass competitor. And Spyfire even pointed out, well, he or she even pointed out where the bed is, or what it appears to be a bed in the Spirit. So, but that's only part of the problem with the Q&As. The second problem is that CIG knows us well enough by now. I mean, this is not our first rodeo when it comes to, like, ship sales. You would think that they would have given us information on whether there's a bed. Like, clear information. Like, just so you guys know, there's 2 beds in the front of the ship. That would have been nice. And stuff like, what's going to fit in it, right? That's a really popular question. That's almost in every single Q&A. What ships will fit in it and which ships will not, or which, in this case, which vehicles, right? And nothing on that. They told us small vehicles will fit. Okay, where do you draw the line at small? Like, there are issues with this. You would think CIG would know better. And part of me, I love CIG. I love Star Citizen. So the issues that I have with them are personal annoyances at most. But it's almost as if they want these things to be vague so that they're leading questions in for the Q&A, right? See, like, they can expect the questions in that case, which means that there's less of a chance that there are going to be difficult questions that they don't want to answer. And that's the other problem that I have with the Q&A. It's almost like they control it on purpose by making the initial sale more vague purposefully. And then another thing about making the initial sale more vague is that it's actually good for marketing, because you're going to have like 3 different people who take the ship in 3 completely different directions if you have vague statistics. Like, I think it's going to be a great smuggling ship. Somebody else might think it's going to be a great, I don't know, hacking ship or something, right? Like, in this particular case, the C1's not a good example, because the role seems to be pretty well defined. But for other ships, that has been the case, where some people are like, ooh, I'm going to take my 890 jump and use it for combat. It's going to be a combat vessel, because it's got all these turrets on it, right? Which, sorry to the 890 jump owners out there, that's not what the 890 jump is for. The 890 jump is a, like, cruise liner and nothing else. So, yeah. So I wanted to bring this up because when I'm looking through the Q&A, I want to jump back over here and see if it's something that Spyfire has already answered in the same way. So I might be completely wrong about this, but we'll see what happens. All right, so we're starting with the Q&A. Following the concept release of the Crusader Spirit series, we took your community-voted questions to our designers to provide you with more information on the recently unveiled ships. Okay, that's with every Q&A. Is a secondary entrance included in the design, or will we only be able to access the Spirit series via the ramp? And hold on. So it looks like this wasn't in. Now, some of the questions probably got upvoted and downvoted for the first 10. This was released like 2 weeks ago, October 11th. No, 1 week ago. My personal answer to that is no. We'll see what happens. I'm just going to go ahead and read through them. There is no secondary entrance. Okay, yep, that's what I thought. The relatively small and straight line layout of the Spirit wouldn't really benefit from an additional entrance, nor was there space to put one without other compromises. Okay, see, that makes sense. That actually is right in line with what I was talking about in the last video. It doesn't really need one because it's a smaller ship, remember? So it shouldn't have the issues that the Mercury Star Runner has, and that's why people ask this question, because the Mercury Star Runner has major issues with this. The ship almost looks stealthy. Will the Spirit have a lower EM/IR signature than the Cutlass? So that's out of left wing. I don't remember that. The ship almost looks stealthy. Retaliator also looks stealthy. Is it stealthy? So his answer was no. Their answer is IR/EM signature is generated by the components attached to the ship and their use, so the ship's appearance has no impact. However, the cross-section signature, that's actually really funny. The ship's appearance has no impact. Retaliator also looks stealthy. Is it stealthy? So it's the same answer. However, the cross-section signature is affected by the shape, so coming at targets head-on or running away will give a reduced signature. Okay, that's kind of cool. This is good to know. We've known this for a long time, but it's good to see it like reiterated in this instance. So far, we have first 2 questions. We haven't learned anything new. Can the tractor... Okay, so this is one I've really been looking forward to. Can the tractor beam mount on the C1 be swapped to the remote turret mount of the A1 and E1? It is not currently planned to allow this, but as the ship progresses through the pipeline, we'll evaluate whether there's a trade-off we need to look at. I think it needs the ability to mount the turret. I would love for this ship to be able to mount that turret, because if you're a smuggler and you're trying to disengage from people who are chasing you, you need that turret. You need it. And you might say, well, maybe the tractor beam is more useful for a smuggler because you can load in and load out more quickly. Well, that's not going to help you very much if they catch you. Right? If you are in SCM mode at the same time they're in SCM mode and you can't get away, you need that turret. Unless the ship's just very fast, right? So, yeah, that's good to know that they're not currently planning to do this, but I'd like to see that. I would like to see that be a thing. Now, in their defense, if you look at the Spirit specs, it actually does say that it has a utility mount as opposed to a turret mount. Those are 2 separate things. And actually, This is one of the answers that is opposite from what Spyfire said. Let's see. Can the tractor be mounted on the C1 be swapped out? And he said, yes, it's a turret hardpoint, not a utility hardpoint. No, Spyfire, unfortunately, you're wrong here. It is a utility hardpoint. You cannot mount a turret there as of the concept right now. That could change. So we're just keeping that in mind. Will there be different types of bombs, like precise strikes or carpet bombs? So this doesn't really, have a whole lot of effect on our discussion, but we'll go ahead and talk about it for the sake of the Q&A. Will there be different types of bombs, like precise strikes or carpet bombs, that we can use with the A1 Spirit? At launch, we only plan to support a single type of bomb, which will be a dumb high explosive. However, in the future, if alternate options do exist, they'll be swappable, just like we support on other ships where you can customize your missile tracker type. As far as different types of bombs are concerned, if it were me designing the game, I would say, how about you can have, there's one bomb. There's only one bomb, but you can swap out the warheads in that bomb and the components inside. So they're more like Star Trek torpedoes as opposed to like custom-built missiles like in modern times today. I'd like to be able to see you be able to put people inside of these and have like drop pods, and like you put supplies in it and you can drop supplies from orbit. Like that would be really cool. You could have like the hell jumpers from Halo as part of your operations squads. So that would be really fun. I think that would be great. Obviously, the A1 is not designed to carry people, but for very short range dropping missions, like from carrier to planet side, that would be really fun. That's what I'd like to see them do. And maybe they would say, like, these bombs are too small, only the Hercules can do that. That would actually make a lot more sense. So, anyway, just a thought there. Which weapon systems can be controlled by the pilot and which can be controlled by the co-pilot? By default, the pilot has control over the nose gun and wing guns, with the co-pilot having control over the rear turret. The nose guns can also optionally be controlled by the co-pilot if desired. Is this anything that we don't already know? Was this over here? No. It looks like this is not a question that was answered by Spyfire, but this is a question that we already knew the answer of. We already know with multi-crew, they're planning to allow the pilot or the captain to decide which tasks are being delegated to the pilot and co-pilot seat. So this isn't necessarily something we don't know before. Looking at the stats of the Freelancer and the Cutlass Black, the Spirit seems to be in the low end equipment-wise. Shields, firepower, cargo capacity, but 2 SCU more defense capabilities. Is this ship going to keep up with the high-speed capabilities of Crusader? I love this question. This goes right into what I was talking about last video, how this would be a great role for a smuggler ship. Let's see if they agree with me. How does the speed and maneuverability of the Spirit compare to ships of similar size role, such as the Cutlass and the Freelancer? See, this is the silly part, because remember, John Crew already said that it is faster and more maneuverable, but he didn't say by how much. Just like other Crusader ships, the Spirit will be more maneuverable than its size would normally dictate, allowing it to run a lower component loadout while still being effective. I mean, I just talked about this last video. Yeah, this is literally all I talked about last video. Can the rear turrets on the A1 and E1 fire forward? No. They specifically cover the rear arc of the ship. What docking capabilities do these ships have? For example, can they dock to a larger vessel? There are no docking capabilities, as the Spirit is small enough to land at any location within an enclosed hangar. These three questions. The first one is not, I would say, the first one is not the community's fault. This one's on CIG, because we already know it's going to be faster, because John Crew already said it's going to be faster. We wanted to know how much, like, specifically, like, how, if you could say, how much faster is it going to be? Will it be able to outrun certain interdictors or whatever, right? Like, how fast is it going to be? And then they just give us this bland answer. And then these two are completely on the community. Like, it's a rear turret. It does not have a forward arc. What docking capabilities do these ships have? And yeah, okay, so I know where this is coming from. If you look at this is it right here. The A1, people are thinking that's a docking collar, and it's not. It's just a flashy thing. The C1 doesn't have it, but the A1 does. So like I can kind of get why some people are confused about that. I guess it's a fair question. There's actually a lot of questions here. Wow, there's a lot of questions. So, hey, good on CIG for that. All right. What kind of living amenities can we expect to see for the crew? Will the E1 have better living amenities for the crew? And will the E1 passengers have a separate VIP bathroom? All three variants have the same crew living quarters with a shared space featuring beds, a small kitchen area, and an integrated shower and toilet. Featuring beds. However, on the E1, passengers will have a separate toilet and shower located beneath the main seating area. A separate toilet and shower located beneath the main seating area. So I guess they go downstairs. Like I hope that doesn't mean like the chair folds out and like they go right there. I don't think that's what that means. I think it means they have to go downstairs and there's like a toilet there, like one probably for everybody, which would make sense for, kind of the short amount of people there. The A2 Hercules has an option slated to swap out the S-10 bombs for a cluster bomb system. Will the A1 Spirit have a similar option? There are no plans at this time to provide alternative bomb launchers as in the A2 Hercules. That's fair. It's a smaller ship. Will it be modular? For example, could we buy one model and then, maybe at some time in the future, swap modules to make our C1 into an E1 or A1? No. Early on in development, we looked at making the ship modular but decided against it as it would require fundamental changes as to how the sections were made. This particularly affected the E1, which would have been much more limited in scope and size. I mean, building for modularity is usually something you want to go for. If it were a Drake ship, I would say it would be a lot easier to do that because like you have the Caterpillar that has its modules, right? But look at how integrated this chassis is, Like, and I know this is just the exterior that I'm talking about, but if you look at the interior, I'm sure like it's probably not modular, like just not built. Like, for example, look at the glass. The E1's the only one that has the glass, for example, I think. So, yeah, just keeping that in mind. It actually, I think it's the only one that has the glass. So, keeping that in mind. It's a different chassis in a way. The PDF, I'm honestly, like, I'm not super depressed about that. Like, I don't really care. I'm not one of those people who are like, I'm going to buy the Avenger Titan and upgrade it to the Warden in-game later on. Like, you can earn money in the game. You can buy yourself a Warden. It's not that big of a deal. The PDF shows 48 SCU of cargo capacity for each variant. This is probably a copy-paste error. Could you confirm? This was a copy-paste error. Website has correct details now. Which Spirit variants can carry vehicles and of what size? Okay, now this is a good question because they were super vague about it. Only the C1 Spirit is designed to fit a vehicle, which can be a Cyclone-sized or smaller. That's big. The E1 and A1 do not officially support any vehicles, although we fully expect players to cram some of the smaller ones in the front in the entrance area. Yeah, the Dragonfly will fit, right? The Dragonfly fits everywhere. But, or the Nox, actually. The Nox technically fits everywhere, but if the Dragonfly had its ability to, become shorter. Anyway, Cyclone-sized or smaller? I think that is no rocks. I think the rock is bigger than a Cyclone. So, no rocks. Okay? So I was right. Even with the increased sizes, no rocks. So that's a big advantage that the Cutlass has, isn't it? Big advantage. The A1, actually, that means that out of all three, the Freelancer, the Cutlass, and the C1 Spirit, the Cutlass is the only one that can fit a rock. Now, the Nomad can as well, but the Nomad has some limitations. But yeah, that's a big deal. That's a big one. That's probably the most important thing that we have learned from this Q&A. The A1 Spirit Bomber variant has a round dish on top of the roof, but the specs don't show the same S2 scanner radar as other variants. What is this round feature? It's the Rule of Cool aesthetic feature. Provides no gameplay benefit. It's honestly kind of a shame, to be honest with you. Like, a lot of people were thinking it might be a docking collar. A lot of people were thinking it might be an extended radar dish. It's just to look cool, y'all. It's a different chassis. That's why it's not modular. I think it would do without it, honestly. Like, give it a different skin. Make the bay modular, and then you would be able to make it modular. But anyway, I am not one of the engineers in the ship pipeline. Last question. Spirit seems to be a break from the naming convention of the Crusader line. Ooh, this is an interesting question. Most Crusader ships are named in reference to Greek or Roman mythology. Where did the name Spirit come from? This is from the narrative team. This is cool. Crusader is seeing the Spirit as a new direction for the brand. Starting with the Starfighter, Ares Starfighter, I suppose. The Ares. No, that's the Ares. Starting with the Starfighter, the company has been moving away from its transport-dedicated routes and is expanding into new markets. With the Spirit's multi-role functions, it decided to leave the old nomenclature behind. Okay. I mean, that's fair. It's kind of fun to see the in-game ship manufacturers take a new direction. For people who don't care about the lore of Star Citizen, you could just skip, but Drake Interplanetary did that. Drake was being seen as way too, for pirates and stuff like that, which they still are. But they hired a new CEO, who I really want to call Blendon Blandon, but I know that's not who it is. It's something like that, though. No, I'm not going to remember it. But anyway, with the Vulture was the first ship that they had to break away from the piracy gameplay type of thing. They wanted to come out with a ship that had low armament, which the Vulture does, and isn't really in the same kind of role as the Cutlass or even the Herald. The Herald, is kind of it's supposed to be a data runner, but it's also kind of a hacking ship, right? So the Vulture is what's going to be bad about the Vulture? Or it's just going to salvage cargo after we've blown you up. And then after that, they came out with the Corsair, and they had a whole new kind of branding for it, even though the Corsair will be a fantastic pirate ship. So anyway, in the lore, they tried to take a new direction with their stuff, and you can actually see that in one of the IAEs. I think it was 2020's Intergalactic Aerospace Expo. Jax McCleary was talking about how they had hired this new CEO and they were trying to take it and have a fresh new look, and they were trying to restart their PR, So anyway, people who don't care about lore can now come back, because we're done with the Q&A. And really things that I thought is important, kind of, but not really. No. Yes, this is important. I don't care. No. Could have been, but no. Definitely not. Docking capabilities. No. I guess this is kind of important for people who thought the A1's round thing was a docking port, but anyway. Not really for me. Not really. No. No. No, 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 no. Yes, the most important thing. No. And I mean, this is interesting, at least. I would rather have this than not have it. So, you know. So what, like maybe 2 or 3 things that we learned out of this whole Q&A, which just goes to show, like, these could have been such much better questions. Like, if people really dug down into the comparisons with other ships, I feel like this could have been better. But anyway, that's just my general thought about almost every Q&A. Almost every Q&A is like mostly fluff questions. So anyway, that is the Q&A stuff. So now we're going to move on back to the size comparison. So this is, again, when I was doing the last video, I mentioned that the sizes were probably wrong and that CIG would change them. And lo and behold, like 2 days after I released that video, they did. And as far as the size is concerned, from this angle, I'm cool. You know, from this angle, I'm cool with that. From this angle, oh yeah, I'm cool with that. It's about the same height as a Cutlass. From this angle, yeah, I'm cool with that. Note, the ramp is still smaller than the Cutlass's ramp. Access, remember? But here's where things start getting interesting. Leave it to Crusader to design a ship that is essentially a flying pancake. That is a lot of surface area. That is huge. Okay? And I was, see, this is something I noticed when I was making the last video, and it was like it was small enough that I didn't really feel the need to mention it, because after all, there's a lot of ships with like lots of height surface area. I mean, the Cutlass has some, right? But it has gotten bigger. It has gotten bigger. And it's one of those things where it's like, if you're running away, if you're running away from somebody, you still have a really pretty low profile. I'm cool with that, right? For smuggling, if you're showing your butt to people and you are flying as fast as you can, you still have a low cross section. That's great. But if you're on the ground, which you might be often, I mean, even now, you're on the ground often when you're doing delivery missions or running drugs or whatever, you have to land. And every time you land, there's a chance that somebody can come by and see you. And now you have a huge cross-section. And for all the people out there who were like, this ship's going to be so much faster and maneuverable than the Cutlass that it's just going to shoot them down. Which, you know, the whole idea of again, I'm going to stand by, the Spirit fighting the Cutlass is not a good thing to think about. But for the people who are thinking this might be an okay dogfighter in its class, if you show your top to people, you can't miss. It's so big. It is so big. And check this out. This is something that I noticed. Let's stop comparing it to the Cutlass for a minute. Okay? We're going to compare it to its big sister, the I cannot navigate this thing to save my life. The MSR. Look at this. Boom. The MSR is obviously bigger, but not by much. Not by a whole lot. Okay? Like, this is where we're at, okay? You have getting to the same amount of surface area, looking from the top and bottom, that you do on the MSR. And you carry half of the cargo space. Maybe you're faster. I think it's like half of the cargo space. 48 versus 100 and something, I think. But I'm just putting this out there to say, be aware of the size, okay? Because the bloat is real. And when they put this ship in development, what inevitably happens is the components don't fit, the seats in the E1 don't fit, the torpedo bays don't fit, And they're like, oh, well, this it's not really going to fit, right, guys? So, if we just increase the length of the ship by 1 meter for this and 1 meter for that and 3 meters for that, and we increase the width by 4 or 5 meters because XYZ, which is really easy to do in engineering design, which the ship pipeline is kind of a lot like engineering design in a way. It's a lot easier to accept those, infringements upon the original dimensions because you're in space. You don't really have to worry about real limitations. But there are limitations, and you will not see them until the ship is in the game, until it's actually flyable, and people are going, man, I'm a giant flying pancake in this thing, So I'm just saying, this is something to keep track of, okay? And then also, I took a look at this. We'll look at the Spirit A1. Oh wait, no, never mind. This is the wrong ship. The A2 is what I was thinking of. Let's do the C2, because C1, C2. Now, obviously, the C2 is a much, much, much bigger ship, but still, like at that surface area, you put this ship on top of that ship, and you're still looking at a huge amount of space there. And now, it's not completely fair to make this comparison. I mean, honestly, obviously, the Freelancer and the Cutlass both also have large profiles from the top, right? I'm not saying it's not a problem for them as well, but this one might be the worst out of all three. Like, I haven't looked at the Freelancer, but let's look at the Cutlass again, just to remember what that looks like. Drake Interplanetary Cutlass Black. Boom. Obviously, the Cutlass wins in terms of top-down kind of stuff. Now, it has a lower cross-section on the sides. That's important to keep in mind. But from the top, it's so much bigger. And then let's look at the Freelancer real quick. MISC Freelancer. It's the standard Freelancer. That's what we care about here. I'll go ahead and take a look at the Max too, just because a lot of people fly the Max over anything else. Yeah, look at that. Look at that. Such a wider profile. Freelancer Max. Okay, so the Freelancer Max has some more issues with that, right? Like, you're getting a lot fatter now. You guys got these giant engines. I still say that the Max wins just by a hair, like it's got some cutouts and stuff and things like that. But anyway, just something to keep in mind, okay? This is not a hugely important problem at the moment, okay? It's just something to think about and something to be like maybe a little worried that once this thing actually does get through the entire pipeline, it will actually like get even bigger, right? So that's something to keep in mind, okay? Because this thing could potentially be very big. And, a lot of people are probably thinking what I used to think, which was like, I always loved it when my ship got bigger. Like, when I had my Caterpillar, and the Caterpillar grew, like, by 50 meters or something crazy like that, and I was like, whoa, I got more ship for the dollar. And the Corsair grew, and, like, there's a lot of ships that grew. For the people who had Idrises, the Idris grew by a huge amount. And they're like, man, I got more ship for the dollar. For a ship like this, that's not necessarily a good thing, okay? Because remember, size matters, but not necessarily in the way that you think it does. It's all about what you're planning to do with the ship. And in my opinion, for a fast cargo ship, you want to be a little bit smaller. Big enough that you can have more fuel, small enough that you can really move, right? Like, you don't want the small fuel tank. Let's see. Speaking of fuel tanks, I wanted to do a real quick comparison because somebody had mentioned in the comments something very interesting that I hadn't thought about, and that is propulsion. That is the fuel tanks, okay? So somebody made the point that the Mercury Star Runner has double the fuel tanks of the C1 Spirit. Okay, that's interesting. So if you look at, and forgive me, at the end of the day, these could be wrong, because I try not to use the ship matrix. I really try not to, because there's so much outdated information on it. But, you know, this is all we have right now, I think. If there's a better something better I can use, please drop it in the comments so that I can stop using this awful thing. But anyway, fuel tanks, Cutlass versus Spirit. The same for everything, except apparently the Spirit doesn't have a fuel intake, but I assume that's just like they forgot to put something in the box, right? Everything else is the same, okay? So theoretically, the Spirit and the Cutlass actually have the same amount of range, which is interesting, okay? Because we're talking about range here. Range is important, all right? So the same amount of range between the C1 Spirit and the Cutlass. And I forgot to have a tab ready on this, but people were talking about the MSR and how it had double the fuel tanks of the Spirit. And I was like, wow, that's actually a really great point to make, because that sets the Mercury Star Runner apart. And the truth is, when I went to look at it, what I noticed is that they are both wrong and right. They're wrong about something critical, but they are right that it technically has double the fuel tanks. And I'm neglecting size here, by the way, when I'm talking about different fuel tanks. I'm assuming that the tank is essentially equivalent to how far it can go, which is probably not the case. I think actually somebody did a comparison on that, and they actually figured out there's some kind of variable based on the size of the ship. But if we look at both the Mercury and the Spirit, take a look at this. Fuel tanks. Two medium fuel tanks versus one medium fuel tank. They're right. The person in the comments was right. There is double the number of fuel tanks on the Mercury Star Runner as opposed to the Spirit. However, they have the same amount of range. Why? Because we're not talking about hydrogen fuel when we're talking about... oh, no. I'm wrong. 2 medium quantum fuel tanks versus 1 medium quantum fuel tank. You are right. I apologize. I am totally wrong about that. It has double the range. I was looking right here. I thought this was the fuel tank. Quantum drives, medium quantum drive. It's not. This is the quantum fuel tank. And 2 medium quantum fuel tanks versus 1 medium quantum fuel tank. So you are totally right. MSR has longer range. That is a great point to make. That is a really interesting thing that sets the Mercury apart from the Spirit as a smuggler. Because you have longer range, you can make less stops, you can go towards less lawful areas. That's a big deal. That's something to think about. I still personally don't like the Mercury, but it might be better for that role. So, good going. Great comment. Perfect comment. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. All right, and that about does it for this video. That's basically everything that I felt had not gotten through on the last video that I wanted to cover here. Because the reception has been so good for these videos, you know, I'm thinking about doing this a little bit more often. I've been a backer since like 2014, so that's like 8 years now. So I know a lot about the game, and I feel like I have some stuff to share. Like I wouldn't do videos like this if I didn't feel like I had something to share, something to provide to you. So I might do more videos in the future. I might do some videos going through Cosmonaut magazine, which was an in-game, well, it's not in-game, but it was an in-lore magazine that was developed by the community. It was actually very fantastically displayed. The layouts and the images that were captured and put into the magazine are fantastic. So I might go through that and read some lore articles for people who might be interested in lore. So if you're interested in me doing that kind of thing, you know, let me know, and I might think about doing some of that. And then also, I've been doing a lot of kind of listening and reading about the new resource management system that's coming down the pike. And every time I read and listen to it, I think in terms of, well, I'm going to have me and I'm going to have my ship to worry about, but what if there's more, right? Like what about for the big org leaders and for the big fleet battles and those kind of things that are going to end up happening in the game? What is that kind of resource management going to really look like? Like what kind of logistical things do we have to worry about when we're talking about like even to get there, even to get to the field of battle where you're going to engage, if you're doing this on a massive scale, kind of like what we see in EVE Online, then what kind of real logistics do you have to get that there? And that would be a very conceptual thing. I wouldn't do it with a whole lot of stock images or video or anything like that. I would probably, I have a little pen pad and stuff that I'd probably just draw like concepts out. That's because that's how I think. I'm a spatial thinker. So I would draw these concepts out and talk about logistics in that fashion. So if you're more interested in lore, let me know. Or if you're more interested in logistics, let me know if that's what you would prefer to see. And, if things keep going like this, I might continue to do this more often. So again, I really appreciate all the support that I got for the last video. Thank you so much for liking, and for those who subscribed, thank you for that. And most importantly, the comments. I really enjoyed reading through the comments. So again, really appreciate it, and I will see you next time.